Welcome to Late Reviews. My name is Arvid, and I watch a lot of movies. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but bottom line is I waste much of my time watching them, and I would therefore like to recommend you which movies you should watch and which ones you should stay away from, especially in terms of horror movie franchises. Of course, I'm just sharing my opinion. Today I'm going to talk about the Anaconda franchise. And this is one of those franchises I remember growing up. It was a franchise everybody thought was bad when we wanted to talk about bad movies. Anaconda was always one of those brought up, especially if we talked about bad horror movies, and especially if we talked about bad franchises and bad sequels. Nobody seemed to like the Anaconda movies, and I therefore had very low expectations going into this. I'm not going to talk about the fifth one in the franchise here because I already covered it in my Lake Placid review. It's a crossover, but what I can say is it's a god awful movie. It's terrible. There's really no reason to watch it. Even if you like all other Anaconda movies, there's no reason to watch Lake Placid versus Anaconda. It's abysmal. It's so terrible and is far below the standard of all the other Anaconda movies. I will quickly go over the plot of each movie, but I will keep it very simple and spoiler free because I do honestly think you might want to watch at least the first one and maybe also the other ones. So I'll try not to spoil things. There will be minor spoilers, just so you're aware, but most things I will spoil will be things that unfolds in the first quarter or first half of the movie. Nothing past that point. But yes, that's about it for the intro. Let's get started. Let's talk about Anaconda from 1997. This is about a film crew going to the Amazon forest to make a documentary about a tribe there. Most of these people it's a bit of a weird ensemble in that they don't really necessarily do that well together. They're quite different people, but they're all in on this adventure of making this documentary. Everybody except the navigator, I think that's what you call someone steering a ship. The one they hired to sail them to this area of the Amazon is a local. And on their way, they come across John Voight, who plays a Paraguayan man, and he's just suddenly stranded on a boat, and they help him, and he joins the team. But can they really trust him? He turns out to be a bit strange. He has this ambition. So whereas our main protagonist, is a tribal expert, he's an expert on tribes and knows how to track them down. It turns out John Voight is an expert on snakes and knows how to track them down. So what is he doing out here in the jungle? And he seems to really want to take power of the boat and steer it in the direction he wants. And it all goes bad when our main lead has an accident with a scuba diving kit. He's trying to get the boat free. The rope has been tangled around something underwater, so he has to go down there. And for whatever reason, there is a dangerous wasp in his scuba gear. So he gets stung in the throat, has an allergic reaction. They have to do the whole straw through the throat thing. I think you know it maybe from popular culture. By the way, medical experts say it's not something that should be tested because this is something that usually goes wrong. Most of the people who have this thing done to them, they die. Of course, last resort, he is trapped out here, he can't breathe. So yeah, straw through the throat. And of course, it's John White who does it because he is a man of the wild. He knows how to do these things. But with the leader of the expedition out of the picture, or rather in what is quite equivalent to a coma, who's going to lead the expedition now? And what really hides in the jungles of the Amazon? And I think that's where I will stop with the plot. Of course, they do encounter an anaconda, otherwise, it would be a very misleading title. And it is an animal horror, it is a monster horror, it is a huge anaconda. But what I think I like about it a lot is that the anaconda isn't really seen a lot in the movie. It starts emerging towards the end of the film, but we do have this build up to it. The film opens with a poacher played by Danny Trejo, who is out on the boat that is suddenly attacked by the anaconda, and we don't see the anaconda, but we see how it tears the boat apart and how Trejo is so afraid of it that he ends up taking his own life rather than facing it. So we already know that there's something dangerous out here. And then while we see our crew happy, jolly on the boat during the day, during the night, we hear weird sounds in the jungle. We see animals. We see a puma. We see large animals suddenly being attacked and obviously killed off screen by something. At one point, two of the protagonists, they go out to the jungle to record some sounds, and They get attacked, but it turns out to be something else this time. But it still, actually, I will actually say what it is. It turns out to be a boar, and John Voight says, "We can eat this. It will be food for a week." And a lot of the crew members are really weird about the point about eating a boar, but boar is delicious. Boar is really, really delicious. I don't know what Amazon boar is like, but I know that of all the meats I've ever had in my life, boar is the best. So if you ever have a chance to eat boar, go for it. It should be a good experience. I mean, it can of course be spoiled or whatever, but boar should be a good experience. Don't be weirded out by it. Enjoy it. Anyway, so what else works about this movie? I think this movie wouldn't have been good had it not been for the cast. The cast is not perfect. It has a lot of well-known faces. It has Jennifer Lopez. I don't know, Jennifer Lopez. How do you pronounce it? I'm not really an expert here. Who is playing the female protagonist? And she's honestly not terrible. She's not an amazing actress, but she's doing fine in this movie. She's her performance is enjoyable, I should say. Ice Cube is in it, and that might already deter you from watching it. But Ice Cube is not doing an over the top character. He is one of the lesser actors in the movie, but he's not doing a bad job. And I think his character is somewhat interesting. I don't know what the movie would be like without him. The navigator is played by someone I don't know. Then we have What's His Face, Pretty Face, and Owen Wilson. Owen Wilson, I do like him in general. I think he's good in a lot of movies, but he also has a tendency to play Owen Wilson. And this is a movie where Owen Wilson is supposed to play a character who isn't Owen Wilson. And he succeeds halfway. I don't think he is amazing in this movie, but he is more downplayed than his usual role, and he's fine. And of course, we have a British guy with a very annoying British accent. Has this very aristocratic British accent, this very arrogant British accent, and he's a terrible character. And I think we're supposed to hate him in the movie. But honestly, I hated him in the movie. I really didn't like seeing him on screen, so it was even more problematic for me. And of course, we have the man of the jungle, Jon Voight. And this movie would not have been the same without Jon Voight. I wouldn't say his performance is so good that it alone makes the movie work, because honestly, it isn't. It's decent, it's good, but it's not over the top. It's not fantastic. It's not as good as it could have been, probably, but it's functional. He's very good at playing this mysterious guy who is also being, a semi-charismatic, but also very dodgy and also very brutal in a survivalist way. And I think that's the cast of the movie. But it works. The acting, the dialogue, everything is passable. Nothing supreme. Jon Voight's accent is so weird. So yes, he's from Paraguay, but his accent, sometimes he sounds like an Italian mobster. Sometimes it's more like a Creole accent. I don't know. It's not really sounds like it belongs to one place, and it's really weird. I think that's also what made the movie less enjoyable. That his accent is a bit all over the place. So his accent, the British guy's accent, there's something about the accents in this movie that's just not great. That does drag it down a bit. And when we actually do see the snake, I should say it actually looks much better than I expected. And I think it's because much of the time it's actually practical effects. Then sometimes they do CGI. Whenever it kills someone, it's CGI and it looks quite bad. Also, there are some scenes towards the end when we see more of it, especially in daylight, where it really doesn't look good. But when we only see parts of it and everything, it actually is really good. I think I could give it a bigger recommendation if the script had been tighter, if the snake had been more convincing, if it had been a bit more exciting. I do think it's very suspenseful, and it's more of I forgot the right word here, but like the intrigue of the boat, what plays out the characters in between is in many ways more interesting than the monster lurking around. But the monster there heightens the stakes of this whole movie, and therefore it tightens it together and makes it actually quite decent. I will not give it a very high recommendation, but I will give it a decent recommendation. I think if you're run out of movies to watch, especially monster horror movies or animal horrors, this is decent. This might do well for you. So Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, also known as Anaconda 2, came out in 2004. This one has a very different plot from the first one, and I will again try to refrain from spoiling anything because this is actually a quite decent film as well. This one is set on Borneo or in Borneo, and it's because that this corporation, pharmaceutical company, has discovered this red orchid that might have the properties to regenerate cells and prolong human life, maybe even making people immortal, essentially. So there's huge potential in this flower, especially financial potential in it. Problem is that it only grows in a very restricted area in Borneo that is very far from everything. It has a very short flowering season, so they have to act really fast to get this. So it cuts to Borneo. Our leads are in Borneo. They are trying to figure out, they're looking for someone to take them around the island. And they find a guy. First, you think it's a local guy, but it actually turns out it's an American who lives there who goes by a local nickname. And he takes them out on this boat trip. And whereas you might think it would mimic the first one, that took much of it took place on the boat, in this one, they do have some intrigue on the boat. All of these are spoiled people from New York. The other one had different groups, like Ice Cube was this urban LA guy who was not accustomed to the outside environment at all, and you had other people who are more accustomed to it and who lived for it. In this one, they're all more or less equally cosmopolitan, with the exception being the navigator and the captain, or the captain and the shipmate, whatever. And the reason why I was confused with what to call it earlier, where I said navigator and not captain, is because the British guy in the film calls him the driver. And I'm quite sure you don't call whoever steers a boat the driver. So that threw me off in that movie. And what happens in this movie, again, not spoiling too much, one of these people working for the company is this British guy who pays the captain a bit more for making the trip faster, and that makes it more dangerous. They try to take a shortcut, and that's why they end up at a waterfall. Boat capsizes, so they have to trek through land. They have more or less one final phone call they can make, so he makes it to this drunken Australian guy who's also out there. So they have to go to the rendezvous point, which means trekking through hostile jungle, all in an attempt to first to get to the orchid, but maybe things happen on the way, so maybe they should actually instead forget the orchid and just go back to civilization, go back to from whence they came. And that's all I'm gonna spoil about the plot. So what I forgot to say about what actually made the first one work really well, it is shot in the Amazon. It is very rare that these movies are shot on the location they're supposed to take place, so that really worked well for it. The second one is shot on Fiji, so not Borneo, but it's close enough. It does give you this authentic jungle environment. Its cast is much less exciting. I don't think it even has one famous actor. I think I've seen the British guy in something else, but I don't remember what. I think in some movies he's the budget Jason Statham, and have all these people, and I don't know, there's nothing exciting to say about them. There's an African American guy I know I've seen in some other things, and most of them are doing a fine job. I would say the British guys are being a bit too annoying. Not saying too much, but he's a bit. I think it's the purpose. He's a bit of a prick, but he's also there's something about his acting I don't like that much. And then we have the one annoying guy who is more or less supposed to be the comic relief character, who is this African American who plays this guy who's really into hip hop and really into being cool, but also every time something happens, there's this huge overreaction for him. So when there's a leech on him, he freaks out. When something else is on him, he freaks out. When something touches him, he freaks out. And whenever he survives a situation or something, he starts yelling and dancing and telling the world how cool he is. And he's also a very good, not programmer, but he's also a nerd in some ways. I know there's something about the character I really don't like. I think he's just too over the top. He feels too cartoony in this world where everybody else is quite realistic in one way and another. The navigator, or no, the captain. The navigator is quite cool of this ship's mate, the local guy. The American captain is not really that interesting. He is, again, all this is C-list. All these actors are C-list. There's nothing too great about them, but also it's just passable performances in general. And there's a cute little monkey in it. And I think it does what the first one did a lot, with suspense, with building up the threat without seeing the threat. This one is much quicker. It feels much quicker in introducing the threat. In the opening, we see an indigenous person being killed by the snake. I think halfway mark is when the first lead character gets killed off. And we do have other jungle threats established, like the first movie had a boar, this one has a crocodile. But yeah, the cinematography, everything looks good in this movie, or looks fine in it, just like the first one. The sound design is decent as well. The snake is maybe even better designed, but we also see much less of it, if that's even possible. Um, it's more that we see its attack without seeing the snake, such as it often comes from underwater, or it's a very quick action that maybe doesn't look that great, but it doesn't dwell on it. And towards the ending, when we see more of the snake, it's in the dark, and they also made the snake black, so it kind of blends more in. In that sense, all of these things work well to actually make it quite effective and not age that bad. But talking about the snake, so they're in Borneo, and they pretend that anacondas live in Borneo. No, pythons live in Borneo. They could have placed the orchid in Latin America. I know that it would have been the same location, so it's actually nice to change it up. So they could have made it a python instead, but then maybe calling it anacondas wouldn't really make sense. No anacondas on Borneo, so why is it an anaconda? And our captain is also a wildlife expert, and this is not spoiling much because it's in the title. So, anaconda or anacondas? Well, it's mating season, so there are many snakes, and they are going wild because it's mating season. And I do like that explanation because that does explain a lot in the movie. I should say also that there are some less effective scenes. Towards the end, we have a lot of scenes that are so dark that you can't really see what's going on. We have some scenes that are boring and just drawn out for way too long. I think there's one campsite scene taking place during the night that takes 20 minutes or something. So a lot of the scenes are not as effective. It feels like it wastes your time more than the first movie did. And that's why the overall enjoyment I got from this movie, the casting, the acting, the script, inferior cinematography, inferior scenes, all make this a less enjoyable viewing experience than the first one. But I think if you did like the first one, you can watch the second one. I wouldn't really recommend it. I don't think it's great, but I think it's not terrible. And quite watchable, especially compared to so much other stuff I watch. Anaconda 3 Offspring came out in 2008. This one is a very different movie to the first two ones. So, a very quick plot summary. They have now captured snakes, anacondas, and they take the DNA or whatever from they use from the orchids and test it on anacondas, and it has made them much bigger, much fiercer, much stronger. They can now regenerate cells much more quickly. So all the things they hope it would do to humans, it can do to these anacondas. And the movie opens with David Hasselhoff and some other people kind of mimicking in a very, very low budget, boring version of The Predator, where they shoot into the woods at this snake, but without really we seeing the snake that much. And that's what I would actually say about this. Whereas the first and second movie were more reminiscent of maybe Apocalypse Now or Cannibal Holocaust or these things, Jaws. This one has much more in common with Predator. There are many scenes where they took ideas from Predator, and I mean, to say that it's making Predator is really not saying that much because it only does it a few times, but I don't know what else to compare it with. This one is much more of an action movie. But yeah, they do have David Hasselhoff and these other guys hunting down a snake, which I think it's supposed to be Romania. The rest of the movie is in Romania, so I think that's also supposed to be Romania, but it's not really established. And then we have this lab where they're testing this on the snake, and this CEO, this leader of this pharmaceutical company, comes to visit the lab, and he doesn't know that they're doing this on the snake. So he's brought to see the snake, and he wants to see more of it, so he flashes a light at it. They try to prevent him from doing it. It's too late. The snake breaks out of its enclosure. It's one of those movies where they build enclosures that are not sturdy enough to actually keep things in. It's one of those stupid movies like that. It breaks free, kills some people, escapes the facility. So some poachers are hired to find the snake or the snakes that are... I think there's more than one. I got a bit confused because it does seem like there's only one, but they do use plural, so there might be more than one snake in this one. It's one of those things that were not that well established in the movie. It's so stupid that you kind of zoom out of it, unfortunately. That does happen sometimes with the movies I watch, that it's very difficult to pay very close attention to what's happening because it's so boring or so stupid that it just doesn't. It goes one through one ear and flows through the other. So anyway, they have these hired guns to take out the snakes in the Romanian countryside, and that's the movie. That's what this is about. Of course, not spoiling too much, but the CEO has an interest in the snake not dying, but being captured alive so they can continue the experiments and maybe create this pharmaceutical product that was introduced in the second movie that might be able to make humans immortal. So this one has an even worse cast than the previous one. David Hasselhoff is the only famous face in it, and he's not doing a good job. He's honestly being a bit annoying in this movie. The rest of them are just typecast, but they look so budget version of cooler people. You have the budget version British guy, you have the budget version alligator guy, you have the budget version strong woman, which the budget version strong woman is a malnourished woman. It's so weird. And of course, you have a blonde lead hero who's a scientist. The snake is black again, which works. A lot of these scenes, I think all of them actually, are shot during the day, so you see much more of the snake. Meaning that making it black hides. It's easier to hide bad CGI with black because there are no practical effects here. Most of the kills are also CGI, but I will say a lot of the kills are fun. You are usually mostly not bored in it because something is happening throughout all of it, either with these poachers, these hunters, some security detail, or these local Romanians who live there. Something is happening most of the time in the movie. It does slow down a bit towards the end where they build up more of the plot. But overall, I think it's somewhat effective. It's not a good movie, but it's honestly not a bad sequel. There are a lot of things are happening, so I think this is a movie you could put on if you go meet up with some friends, get drunk, and watch this film. You might actually like it because it has that schlocky, bad movie vibe filled with enough action to maybe make this an enjoyable group experience. Watching this by myself, I can't say I enjoyed it that much, but it also is not that bad. So Anaconda 4, or Anaconda Trail of Blood, came out in 2009. This is a direct sequel to the previous one and pretty much takes off where the other one ended, with our lead protagonist, the female character, now still being in Romania in the mountains, trying to actually, it's not really, I think, it's not really well established what she's doing there, but she's doing some research with some locals. And the bad CEO, or the evil guy, he hires a group of Romanians to track down this hidden Orchid lab in the Carpathian Mountains and also kill the lady because she knows too much. So she's a loose end that needs tied up. And the movie opens with this. You see this lab, this guy who has this lab where he has all these orchids and all these test subjects. And of course, one of the test subjects is a huge snake that escapes. This anaconda looks nothing like the snakes in the other movies, by the way. And I think it's quite hilarious. The way it looks is very hilarious. Not only does it look very fake and very CGI, but it also looks evil. It is grinning when it's killing people. It's actually, there's something about this design that is so bad that I kind of like it. And the plot is then that this lady comes across a local college student who is home for, I don't know, the summer or something. He's studying something that has to do with human society. It's not anthropology, it's something else. And he heard there was some excavation site in that area. And then the last people we have are people working for that excavation site. I actually thought they were hikers at first, but it would make more sense if they were excavators or archaeologists, whatever. And they're supposed to meet up with the people already working there. So they are searching for the base camp, but the road has been blocked, so they have to go there by foot. And the rest of this movie is just 2 to 3 groups of people walking around the Romanian woods doing absolutely nothing. This movie is very boring. Things start to happen towards the end of it, but it's so boring and it's so poorly made. There's a big drop in quality. There was already a drop in quality cinematographically speaking from second to the third one, but this one looks even cheaper. The acting is perhaps even worse, and it's not necessarily just worse. You care even less about it. There are even less memorable performances in it, and there's just nothing good to say about it. There's one good thing, and this is a minor spoiler, but at one point a guy tries to kill the snake by pulling the pin on a grenade right as the snake is about to eat him, so that he would kill himself and the snake. But instead of eating him, the snake just moves away from him. And that reminded me, I think it's in Kong Skull Island. They stole that scene from this film, which is a weird thing to steal from this film. Maybe this film stole it from somewhere else, but that is the only good scene in this movie. Plot-wise, I should also mention that now, to make the mortality powers of this flower compatible with humans, they try to test it on animals and then use the animal blood and then have that injected into humans. And they find out that the only blood that works is this anaconda blood. Which, if we are to believe Lake Placid versus Anacondas, that's not true. This doesn't work. We actually know that this works in this film, that it does work to have this anaconda blood infused with your own blood. That it does help regenerate your cells and cure your diseases. The last movie in the series just ignores that completely. But yeah, that's all I have to say about it. It's not good. Don't spend your time on this. It's the only movie in the series that I don't think has any redeemable qualities. It's not outright garbage, it's just not good. That means we can wrap it up, and I'll give you my recommendations. So the first one has enough qualities for me to give you a small recommendation for it. The sequel has, if you like the first one, I think there's a reason to watch the second one. I don't think it's as good, but I think it has some good qualities to it that if you don't have anything else to watch, you can actually watch it, but it's really low on the priority list or the recommendation list. The third one is a bit insane. Not as batshit insane as Jason X or something similar, but it is quite insane. You might get some quality just watching this with a bunch of friends, getting drunk, maybe even have drinking games. There are a lot of people dying in this movie. You can have drinking games around that. A lot of guns, a lot of everything, a lot of bad David Hasselhoff acting. So yes, I can give this one a small recommendation for that reason. And the fourth one, no recommendation at all. Of course, the fifth one is the worst. Stay away from it. It's terrible. And that's it. If you want to see my written reviews for these movies, I don't think they're that in-depth, but you can check out my profile at Letterboxd called The Robot Quits. And until next time, have fun.